Okay, today we're going to talk about trouble from the north, and I think you'll understand that. I do this from the Columbus, Ohio area, and I would just ask, there were 2 police officers who were murdered yesterday in Columbus, and I wish you would keep those families in prayer. I know I saw the Westerville police chief very emotional in his talk about that last night about what happened. And President Trump was gracious enough to call the families. It's still under investigation, but I understand it's a domestic dispute, and the guy, from what I've heard, he planned to do it. So hopefully they will seek the full measure of justice in this heinous crime rising out of a domestic dispute. So today we're going to talk about trouble comes from the north. I will confess to you that things might be a little bit jumbled today because there was a lot going on, and I was going back and trying to piece together some of the things that are themes that I had talked about previously about the north, mainly the north of Israel, and I'm not sure that I got them all put together. Everything seemed to be going along pretty okay this week, and then Iran decided to launch a drone into Israel, and then everything sort of unwound from there. But this is an example of the type of world that we live in, where things will unwind very quickly. Things will change quickly as we see these converging events happening. It is very difficult if you try to pay attention to keep up. And it's harder today, and I'll mention it in a little bit if I remember. There's so much disinformation out there, and people get on YouTube and they start speculating about things, and then people say, well, I heard about this, and they never, you need to be very careful about what you talk about, especially on Facebook and that type of thing. Research it, Google it. If somebody says, for example, we've heard these claims made now for months that there are 13,000 unsealed indictments in the federal system that are going to be dropped on people, and there will be thousands of arrests. And I'm going to suggest to you that I'm very skeptical of those claims. I have researched list after list of case numbers where people said, this is an unsealed indictment, this is an unsealed indictment. And I have examined dozens of these cases. And if somebody wants to write me a check for the $50 I've probably spent out of my own pocket on doing this research, and it could have been more if I'd gone into more cases, I've not found one of those cases that involved an indictment. And yet people are running around saying, oh, look at all these sealed indictments. There are sealed filings in federal cases all the time now, and I think what's happening is people are doing a search in the PACER database, and they're putting in I won't say that they've rigged the search. They've put in sealed, and they're coming up with all of this data, but in my view, it's bad data. In early November, there was somebody that I heard talk, and this person said there were 4,000 sealed indictments, and the rest were going to start the first Friday in November. Now, how many of you have heard about arrests from all these indictments? None. How many of you not heard? Yeah, everybody will raise their hand on that one. And so I want justice to be done. I want bad people to go to prison. I want the full measure of justice for this guy who killed 2 good police officers yesterday here in Columbus. And if that involves the death penalty, that's fine. Give him his trial. I don't think it needs to be 4 years in the future. Wait a couple months, and try him. But in early November, there were 4,000 sealed indictments. Now the number is over 13,000. Now I want you to use common sense and reason when you look at these things. That means that there are 9,000 additional indictments, sealed indictments, in essentially 90 days. That's 100 per day, 7 days a week. Now, I've done criminal cases. You do not get indictments in complex cases, many of whom involve multiple defendants, in less than a year, especially if you have a Justice Department who is at odds with you and an FBI who wants to take you down. Okay? I just would urge people to use some common sense. And I understand you want all these people to go to jail that did bad things. But these indictments are complicated. Every single indictment involves a grand jury. Every grand jury meets for a long period of time. They may have a 2-year term or a 21 or 23-month term. There are 23 people involved. I'm just telling you that if there were 100 indictments, 100 grand jury decisions, some of which would involve multiple defendants coming down every single day, there would be a lot of buzz in the legal community. And here's what I've heard about it. Nothing. Okay? So that leads me to conclude that the data is bad. People's intentions are good, but their data is bad. And they will happen. And listen, I've heard rumors, people saying, oh, Trump has created secret military tribunals as in throwing these people into secret prisons. Did we get rid of the Constitution? And I will say, if Trump has gotten rid of the Constitution, I will oppose him as much as anybody else. So I'm just saying is please act reasonably. And there's another one that came out the other day, and I think somebody, well, we'll see because it's supposed to happen tomorrow, and I'll mention that if I remember. So, trouble comes from the north. In Jeremiah chapter 1, Jeremiah began, first he identifies himself, and then he goes into his first of his prophecies. Jeremiah 1:1, the words of Jeremiah, the son of Hilkiah, of the priests that were in Anathoth, in the land of Benjamin. I mentioned Benjamin last week. Remember, I showed you that palace that King Hussein had built there in Jerusalem over the tribal area of the tribe of Benjamin. Verse 2, to whom the word of the Lord came in the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah, in the 13th year of his reign. And we know that historically Jeremiah was a prophet to the southern kingdom of Judah in the days leading up to the captivity when the Babylonians would come in. And what Jeremiah does is he uses a biblical principle or metaphor that is used to warn people. And it comes in verse 13, and the word of the Lord came unto me the second time, saying, what seest thou? And I said, I see a seething pot, and the face thereof is toward the north. Then the Lord said unto me, out of the north an evil shall break forth upon all the inhabitants of the land. For lo, I will call all the families of the kingdoms of the north, saith the Lord, and they shall come, and they shall set every one his throne at the entering of the gates of Jerusalem, and against the walls thereof round about, and against all the cities of Judah. And I will utter my judgments against them, touching their wickedness, who have forsaken me, and have burned incense unto other gods, and worshiped the works of their own hands. And you can read more about what was going on in Judah at the time. Ezekiel chapters 6, 7, and 8, and 9 talk about the idolatry that was going on among the priests and in the temple of God. And so what happened when God brought judgment against the people of Israel, and the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah, the trouble came from the north. And that's why, because we're entering another one of those periods where God's going to deal with people, that's why we're hearing so much about the northern part of Israel. Because this problem that comes in the end times, in large part, comes from the north. An alliance of kingdoms, alliance of countries, rulers that come from the north. When the kingdom of Israel, the northern kingdom, fell about 722 BC, about 115 years before the Babylonians came to take people away in the first captivity. The trouble came from Assyria. There was the Assyrians that came in, and they also came from what direction? They came from the north. Now, when they came, a lot of people in Israel, the northern kingdom, knew that things were going to be problematic. They knew trouble was coming. The prophets were telling them that trouble was coming. And some paid attention. Some were upset with the rank idolatry in the northern kingdom. And the history of the northern kingdom, the kingdom split after the death of Solomon. Rehoboam was the first king of Judah. Jeroboam was the first king of the northern kingdom of Israel. The northern kingdom didn't have a single king who followed in the ways of the Lord. They had kings like Ahab and his wife Jezebel. The capital was eventually set up in Samaria. We were there last spring and we saw where they found the tombs of Ahab and Omri, kings of the northern kingdom, who had built the city of Samaria. But a lot of people from all the 10 northern tribes fled to the southern kingdom of Judah because they knew trouble was coming. And in fact, I believe I have my historical facts accurate on this. There were so many people that moved to Jerusalem for protection because these kings were coming. There were also people coming from the south taking over, but Sennacherib and other kings from Assyria came from the north. And for example, they laid siege to Samaria for 3 years. It sits very high up on a hill. It was almost an impregnable city, and it took 3 years for Samaria to fall, similar to the time that it took Jerusalem to fall when the Romans attacked in 68 to 70 AD. But so many people fled from the north that the city of Jerusalem more than doubled in size. And when you look at Jerusalem today, you see the Mount of Olives to the east, and then there's what they call the Western Hill. That's where the old city is today. And it was essentially a sheepfold. It was a place of protection for the children of Israel who were praying for protection from the king of the north, the king of Assyria, Sennacherib, we know, who was coming to destroy them. We know what happened, right? You know the story where Sennacherib's armies were destroyed. Tens of thousands of them killed. And Sennacherib went home. Didn't really write about that. He wrote about all the other cities that he took over, but not the one where he got his lunch handed to him. So trouble comes from the north. There's a lot of things going on. I mean, you could pick up on anything. I'll just focus on a few things before we get to Israel. We had this earthquake in Taiwan. I'm going to guess that building is no longer safe for habitation. There were many people killed, but look, we live in a time where it seems like these earthquakes are happening all the time. This was an interesting factoid that kind of came my way this week, and I haven't verified it, but depending on when you start, the Berlin Wall stood for 10,316 days, and this week we passed day 10,316 since it fell. So what should that make all of you feel? Old. You remember how big the Berlin Wall was? I mean, it went up it started in construction in the summer of 1961, and it fell, and things fell apart in 1989. It took a little bit longer to get the Berlin Wall completely demolished. But it was such a big deal growing up. The divided city of Berlin, and people trying to escape, and people being killed when they tried to escape. And now it's been gone longer than it was ever up. And it makes you feel a little bit older. And it should, because you are. I mean, even people that say, oh, I was a kid when that happened. Well, you're not a kid anymore. You're in your mid-30s. So this week, it was also an interesting week in that the stock market seemed to be a little bit volatile this week, mostly on the downside. And they say it's a correction. Don't worry about it. You never know. This is a graph of some of the index performances, and you can see that everything was going along pretty great. The president gave a speech, State of the Union, everything was fine. And what's happened since? It's gone down quite a bit. Here's the Dow Jones Industrial Average from 2016 all the way through this week. And it's still pretty high, but it's gone down. So it's become very volatile. And it's always interesting in the midst of all this, it's a lot of people are very concerned about how things are going in the market and that type of thing. Then we see this week. This is the SpaceX. I don't know if I have the sound on this or not. This largest rocket ever launched is what I'm understanding. Yeah, to launch a Tesla into space. They must have a very long cord for it. Or maybe it's solar powered up there, I don't know. And everybody's all upset about this, but it was the SpaceX Heavy is what they called it. And there was this interesting, the stages separated, and then you'll see this, and it was successful. They've had at least one blow up on the launch pad. And I thought I wish they'd had these graphics when John Glenn was flying. By the way, that was like 37 years ago this week. 36 years ago. Was it 36? 46, 56. What am I saying? Yeah, I'm old, 56 years ago. But it was kind of cool how they had these rockets, the boosters come back and land. I mean, this is the stuff that they used to be in the, whatever that science fiction series that I used to read when I was a kid. Very interesting. This is something, we've talked some about the technology and things that are coming about people. And so here's a website that's been put up, id2020.org. And the purpose is to give everybody an identity. Now, it's understandable. We have a lot of problems in the world. We know that there's huge problems with sex trafficking and everything that takes place, right? And we all want to stop that. And one way to stop that is to put in some way to track people. Now, there will be people who will use this for evil. I'm just telling you that whatever this mark is, okay, we don't know exactly what it's going to be. The technology's changed a lot. We know that there will be something that people will use by which they will buy or sell. And I'm just saying that there is a big push for individual identity. We know that in China, they put in facial recognition. They put in cameras that are able to track your car without looking at your license plate. And the same way to track your face. You go out to some of these places where they want everybody to come and then they don't want you to use your car to get around, like California. So they put up these toll lanes to make it really expensive for you to drive. And they look at your license plate, or you have a card that's scanned as you drive through the toll plaza. But in China, they don't even need that because they know what your car looks like. The scratches, the dings, that you might get when somebody in the garage opens the car door too far or something like that. And your car has these unique identifiers. And so the technology is there. And now these big corporations and Rockefeller Foundation are getting together to get in this identity for everybody in the world to have an identity. They're also getting together. You see here, health groups suffer as Amazon, Berkshire, and JP Morgan team up. One of the largest banks, Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett and Amazon, whose head, Jeff Bezos, is now the richest person on the planet. And I saw where his net worth in one of the last run-ups in the market had gone up like $25 billion or something like that, just in a couple of weeks. So this is something that's coming. It's just something I think you need to be aware of and you need to be on the lookout for. So let's look at this memo a little bit. There was the Nunes memo, and they also came out with another memo this week. And they're trying to take down Trump. I don't think there's any question about that. There are, and you notice everybody says, well, if Trump gets out, Mike Pence will be a president, right? And they'll leave him alone, right? You think they'll leave him alone? It'll be worse. I mean, even the Olympians are getting on his case. I mean, can anybody not just celebrate anything? Does everything have to be political? And now here they fired one of the White House staff people for domestic abuse. And it's, well, I don't know if the guy's guilty or not. It used to be people were allowed to prove things in court, but now allegations are sufficient to destroy careers. Unless you're Bill Clinton, you'll still get away with it. There's a lot of the texts that are exchanged. There's a lot of question as to whether, what is this? And it appears Obama said he wanted to know everything that they were doing, yet he claims to have no information. And by the way, can somebody put him on a milk box, a milk carton, so we can find him? Because I haven't seen him much lately. Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying, I'm concerned about the guy, and he seems to have disappeared for a while, which seems to show to me that this media thing is really out of control. This also came out. This is Bill Gertz's column from a couple weeks ago in the Washington Times. And one of the things that they have done was, remember Obama gave all that money and pallets of cash to the Iranians. And so what did the Iranians do? They built orphanages and hospitals with it, right? Well, here's what Gertz reported. The U.S. government has traced some of the $1.7 billion released to Iran by the Obama administration to Iranian-backed terrorists in the 2 years since the cash was transferred. Shock. I'm just shocked. According to the knowledgeable sources, Iran has used the funds to pay its main proxy, Lebanon-based terrorist group Hezbollah, along with the Quds Force, Iran's main foreign intelligence and covert action arm, an element of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. The U.S. money supplied to Iran as part of an arms settlement dating back to the 1970s has also been traced to Iran's backing of Houthi rebels seeking to take power in Yemen. Iran has been supporting the Yemen rebels as part of a bid to encircle and eventually take control of Saudi Arabia. Defense Secretary James Mattis has been one of the administration's main hawks on Iran. In the administration's recently released defense strategy blueprint, Mattis shifted the focus of American defenses from countering terrorists to confronting nation states. He said, do you understand that all of these things I'm telling you play into the Bible prophecy end time scenarios of wars and rumors of wars? Mr. Mattis shifted the focus of American defenses from countering terrorists to confronting nation states. He said Iran continues to sow violence and remains the most significant challenge to Middle East stability. In the Middle East, Iran is competing with its neighbors, asserting an arc of influence and instability while vying for regional hegemony, using state-sponsored terrorist activities, a growing network of proxies, and its missile program to achieve its objectives, he stated. Also released this week was the Grassley-Graham memo, the Grassley letter, which, how many of you have really heard this discussed and analyzed in the media? It's more significant than the Nunes memo. Now, you'll see a lot of the pages are blacked out because of classified information, but Lindsey Graham and Senator Chuck Grassley put out this memo based on the analysis of the things that they had seen and the evidence that they had taken before their various committees. And it paints a worse picture than I think the Nunes memo does, but it's like, I guess the media took the weekend off. It's amazing that these things happen and then nobody even talks about it. And they wonder why people say, well, I think, it might be fake news. So, but fortunately, we live in a digital age where it's hard to hide these sorts of things. Now, Andy McCarthy is a former federal prosecutor. He tried the blind shake, the guy who did the first World Trade Center bombing back during the Clinton administration. And he's a terrorism expert. He's written some books on it. He writes for National Review. And one of the things he has said all along is, listen, they won't go to the FISA court unless they have verified information. I've heard him say this in interviews. I trust the FBI enough. So let's look at just some of the paragraphs from his recent column in National Review. As I outlined at greater length last week, in applying for a warrant, the government must establish the reliability of the informants who witnessed the alleged facts, to support a probable cause finding. Christopher Steele was not one of those witnesses. He is not the source of the facts. He is the purveyor of the sources, anonymous Russians, much of whose alleged information is based on hearsay, sometimes multiple steps removed from direct knowledge. Steele has not been in Russia since his cover as a British spy was blown 20 years ago. He has sources who have sources who have sources, and so on. None of the information is better than third-hand. Most of it is more attenuated than that. For purposes of justifying a warrant, it does not matter that, in a totally unrelated investigation involving corruption at FIFA, the FBI judged that the hearsay information provided by Steele, then a British agent, checked out. In his anti-Trump research, Steele could not verify his sources. Furthermore, he is now a former intelligence officer who is then working for private clients, which is the advocacy business, not the search for truth business. The only reliability that counts is the reliability of the factual informants, not of the investigator who purports to channel the informants. The judge wants to know why the court should believe the specific factual claims. Was the informant truly in a position to witness what is alleged? And if so, does the informant have a track record of providing verified information? The track record of the investigator who locates the sources is beside the point. A judge would need to know whether Steele's sources were reliable, not whether Steele himself was reliable. But that was not the half of it. Steele's agreement with the FBI was that he would not communicate with the press. He made the agreement and then communicated with the press anyway, which showed what? He was unreliable, notwithstanding the FBI's continued insistence to the contrary. He hadn't just flouted the agreement by speaking to the press, though. He had clearly lied about doing it. And he concludes with this: I spent many months assuring people that nothing like this could ever happen, that the FBI and Justice Department would not countenance the provision to the FISA court of uncorroborated allegations of heinous misconduct. When Trump enthusiasts accused them of rigging the process, I countered that they had probably had not even used the Steele dossier. If the judgment had used it in writing a FISA warrant application, I insisted that the FBI would independently verify any important facts presented to the court, make any disclosures that ought in fairness be made so the judge could evaluate the credibility of the sources and compellingly demonstrate probable cause before alleging that an American was a foreign agent. I was wrong. And I applaud Andy McCarthy for stepping up and admitting that he put too much faith in this nest of corrupt people that are running the FBI and other places and running for high offices. And I think personally that there are some, and I will say this, I doubt that I'll be in front of a FISA judge. It's just not my area of practice. But I can tell you that there are some judges that need to answer questions as well, because this information, they had to renew this warrant at least 3 times, including after Trump was sworn into office. And they never had factual information. And then it was on the New York Times front page, I think yesterday, U.S. spies paid Russian peddling Trump secrets. There were other spies from Russia that were paid by the U.S. intelligence agencies, CIA, I believe, and another one, for more information, some of which, and one of the things they were promised were salacious details about Donald Trump. And they paid this one guy $100,000, and shock of all shocks, he disappeared with the money. If you find him, I'll bet you find Obama. I'm just making a guess. That came to me just then, so. This is also, I mean, you need to watch this, the scandal in a big charity in the United Kingdom. Front page of the Times just the other day. Top Oxfam staff paid Haiti survivors for sex. They went down there to help with the earthquakes, and they were having sex, appears, orgies with underage girls. They described them as Caligula-type orgies. So, let's get to the good news. I'm just kidding. This report this week that North Korea may be months away from nuke strike capability on U.S. territory. I think they're probably already there. They just need a reliable weapon. This is from a graphic from this morning's New York Times showing the reach of various countries and their nuclear capabilities. For example, you see Saudi Arabia there, can reach into Africa and partway up into Europe and part of Italy. Iran can reach a little bit further, or not quite as far. You have Pakistan, Taiwan, South Korea, and the big circle here is North Korea. And it is amazing to me. This is a heinous, rogue, evil, wicked regime. And the sister of Kim Jong, baby Kim now that's in charge, goes to the Olympics, and everybody's all aflutter about, oh, look how pretty she is and everything. I'm shocked. The president of South Korea went up and shook her hand. And they're like, oh, it looks like Mike Pence isn't going to have anything to do with her. Good for Mike Pence. This regime is evil. And I guess, for the Olympics, I don't have a video. They did this drone thing at the opening ceremonies that I found to be very creepy. Like 1,200 drones. I'll have to look it up and play it sometime. In the meantime of this, we know that this coalition, the 1 unit is equal 38 and 39, is that it happens like before the 70th week of Daniel and the early part of the 70th week. Some think it's part of the Armageddon scenario. But we do know that there is an alliance of nations, and one of the alliance of nations is the ancient kingdom of Put, which is Libya. And we know that there's a kingdom from the north. A lot of us think that it's Russia. And here we see that Libya is now going into the Russian camp, which is sort of another piece of the puzzle, sort of being almost ready to be clicked in place. And it's a puzzle that I can do, not one of those. My wife will attest to the fact that I don't have the patience for those big, complicated jigsaw puzzles. But this one I can figure out, and this is another part of it. This is what's happening. There were reports early in the week that this is from Lebanon, that the army would confront any Israeli encroachments to the border. Because there's this issue about everything that's going on in the north. This week, another rabbi was stabbed and killed. And it's interesting, I probably can't read the title and the headline there. It says this, Uri Ariel at funeral. The time of the Temple Mount has come. Now, this is from a left-wing newspaper in Israel, Haaretz, and I don't make this up. But what I see is that there is this stirring in the Jewish people for rebuilding a temple. I and many others believe that that is part of the end time scenario. Now, how that happens exactly, I don't know. I don't remember if I put it in or not. I got it off Jack Hibbs' Facebook page, and I'll show you that a little bit later. This week, Erdogan went to Italy to discuss Jerusalem with the Pope. Now, Erdogan's the head of Turkey, right? And the Pope's in the Vatican, right? And Erdogan went to Italy to discuss this. By the way, I wanted to mention this. they're not only going after President Trump, they're going after Prime Minister Netanyahu. It is my understanding that the police, and this has been going on for a long time, and they have always been saying indictment is imminent, or it's going to happen any moment. And this has been going on, this has been over a year or more that I've heard about this. Now, there are two basic cases in which Prime Minister Netanyahu is being investigated. By the way, they were investigating Sarah Netanyahu, his wife, about, I don't know, she was having takeout for dinners at the Prime Minister's residence and billing it to the Israeli government or something like that. And they were saying they were going to indict her. This is what left-wing people do. They do not care who they wreck along the way as long as they get what they want. And there was a report yesterday by, I think, a highly irresponsible person on YouTube. You can look it up. I won't mention his name here, saying that Netanyahu would be indicted, he would resign on Monday and serve 6 months in prison, according to his sources. Now, I'm telling you, and there were all kinds of people on my Facebook, is this true? Can this be true? And Amir Sarfati and others, I talked to Brian Schrager, or texted with him. It's fake news, especially with what's going on in Israel right now. I doubt that anything like this will happen, but we'll see tomorrow if this person was right. But I think I'm tired of these people on YouTube just getting out there and spouting off things that they can't back up at all. And it gets everybody upset. And I'm tired of it. So look it up on YouTube, find out who it is. And if Netanyahu does not resign tomorrow, don't listen to the guy anymore. Okay? Be a Berean. Okay? Look, check out what I say. We have a thing here at Fellowship Bible Chapel called the Department of Corrections, because we need it every now and then. We're human beings, and we will make mistakes from time to time, and we try to correct those when we do them. So Erdogan went to. Here's a report from the Turkish press before Erdogan went.
The last time the Turkish president and the Pope met was in 2014 in Turkey. It was one of Francis's first trips as Pope. Building bridges between religions and cultures was top of the agenda. They haven't met since, but the world has seen them sharing humanitarian concerns. The Pope regularly preaches about the plight of refugees and visits them in their camps. Likewise, President Erdogan has given shelter to 3 million refugees and has shown strong support to them for years. Now, their common concern is Jerusalem.
Hagia Sophia has, over the centuries, been both a church and a mosque. It's been a centerpiece for both Christians and for Muslims. Now, it's a museum, and it's a space that's shared peacefully by both faiths. But in Jerusalem, there is no such understanding, and this is something that the President of Turkey and Pope Francis will be working together to resolve.
The Pope used his last Christmas message to call for a two-state solution.
On this festive day, let us ask the Lord for peace for Jerusalem and for all the Holy Land. Let us pray that the will to resume dialogue may prevail between the parties and that a negotiated solution can finally be reached. One that would allow the peaceful coexistence of two states within mutually agreed and internationally recognized borders.
The Turkish president recently voiced a similar opinion, but the language was noticeably stronger.
Mr. Trump, Jerusalem is the red line for Muslims. Our struggle on this matter will continue with resolve. As a matter of fact, this can go as far off as breaking off our diplomatic relations with Israel.
Okay. And then here's a little video of the actual meeting that they had. There's no sound in this video. Erdogan called upon the Vatican in Monday's meeting to help Turkey and the Muslim world preserve Jerusalem's status. We need to work together to preserve Jerusalem's status, he said to Pope Francis. The messages you will convey to the Catholic world on this are important. Now, it's interesting from and I don't want to, I'm gonna mention it. It was on Breaking Israeli News. I saw it linked to on Jack Hibbs' webpage or Facebook page. And he said, look, this is stuff you won't hear in the press. And what it talks about, there were some messianic teachings, prophecies that came out of some of the rabbis over the past centuries. Now, I'm very careful about anything extra biblical. I think the Bible is our guide, and I'm only passing this along for information purposes to show where some of the religious Jewish people are in terms of a coming Messiah. And one of the things that they have determined is that there is going to be an alliance between Roman Catholicism and Islam prior to the coming of the Messiah. Now, there's a big debate going on. What is final Babylon? And there was a prophecy conference out of Calvary Chapel, Tustin yesterday. I think Don Stewart got that part of, they went through the book of Revelation. And Don Stewart said there, and I think he was pretty accurate, that there are like 5 different views, 4 or 5 different views on what Babylon is. Some think it's Rome. Some think, like Joel Richardson, that it's from Saudi Arabia, Mecca. Others think it's something else. And others think that this final Babylon is ancient Babylon revived, which I think is the view that Don Stewart has. And there was a debate recently between Bill Salas and Joel Richardson, very cordial, very well done. And Joel's got some things up on his blog responding to some things he didn't have time to do in the debate about, is it Rome and the Catholic Church, or is it Islam and Mecca? And they have different conclusions right now. And we'll see which one is right. I happen to think what I see happening in the world is this, what I would call the Red-Green Alliance. I think Trevor Loudon has coined that term. And you see this uniting of the left and Islam, which it just doesn't seem to make any sense, but they seem to be united in a lot of different places and things. And so, look, if this is the time, then I think this is maybe the scenario on how this plays out. So Erdogan met with the Pope. They had their little niceties there at the Vatican. And in here it says that this report in the Washington Post, and Turkey soaring support for Syrian offensive and rising anti-Americanism. And it's interesting, you go here and this is from Pope Francis this week. There's a dispute right now. Who gets to appoint the cardinals in China? And right now it looks like the Pope's going to give that to the Chinese government. I'm just saying, you want to talk about a red-green alliance and that sort of thing? And this guy came out and said this, the Chancellor of the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences, and we have a Pontifical College, we drive by it every Sunday, coming up around High Street here, down there in Worthington, the Josephinium, one of the only Pontifical seminaries outside of the Vatican. China is the best implementer of Catholic social doctrine. Wow. There was a big alliance of evangelicals got together this week. Max Lucado, Jen Hatmaker, Beth Moore, about, immigration, and we need to do more with immigration. And I don't think it's charity to make other people pay for your idea, okay? That's just my opinion of it. And I'd like to go by their houses and see how many people they're putting up in their big houses. I don't have a very high view of these people, but this is being pushed in evangelicalism now, and it's a left-wing idea. Erdogan, Washington is scheming against Turkey, Iran, and Russia and Syria. Over in Poland, Naftali Bennett was to go there, and he's criticized the Polish government about the Holocaust, and so they said, okay, you can't come. This came out today. You think England's not in trouble? The BDS movement has been nominated for the 2018 Nobel Peace Prize. Yes, I'm not kidding. And this, I can't remember her name I think she's a member of the Knesset in Israel. she was livid, to say the least, that this had happened. BDS, an anti-Israel, anti-Jewish movement, is nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. But look, who they've given Nobel Peace Prizes to before? Obama, Jimmy Carter, Yasser Arafat. And then here comes the guy from, no sound on this either, Prime Minister Modi from India, comes and he goes to the West Bank and he meets with Abbas, who's in the 14th year or 15th year of his 4-year term, democratically elected, they claim. And he said this when he was in the West Bank, that this man that you will see in the next clip was one of the greatest leaders in history. Now, who could he have been talking about? He was talking about, well, I don't have time to play all this. Yasser Arafat. I'm serious. Just the other day, Yasser Arafat, one of the greatest leaders in history. Even the World Economic, or the World Bank gets into this. They come out with a report, economic monitoring report, with right actions, Palestinian economic growth could rise to 7%. And guess what part of that report essentially says? If we get the Jews out of Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, Palestinians will be successful. And this is how they try to remove people from Judea and Samaria. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. The U.S. had a bunch of troops in Israel for a large-scale drill. One interesting thing that's going on is that this is foreign policy. Trump is all talk on Iran, and the way they sort of analyze things is whatever Trump says, it's wrong. That's sort of the way it seems a lot of these foreign policy analysts are going this way. Putin himself is being criticized, or there's some concerns expressed about him that, remember George Bush said mission accomplished, he went on that carrier, and then we're still fighting, there's still war going on in Iraq and still all kinds of things going on. And Putin has said mission accomplished in Syria, and maybe not so much. At the same time, Israel and Lebanon are in a dispute over gas. Turkey has been moving into northern Israel. I might have something on this. This was in the New York Times. In an unusual act, Syrian soldiers fire at drone in the Israeli Golan. There's this dispute going on between Egypt and Ethiopia and Sudan about the Nile River. And why is that important? Well, there are 90 million people that live in Egypt, and 98% of them live along the Nile River. And Ethiopia is building a big dam that might affect the flow of things. And it's interesting that there's a prophecy in about the great, I think it's about the Aswan Dam. I think it's Isaiah 19 or Ezekiel 19. That's put that down for the Department of Corrections, and I just don't remember right off the top of my head. But I think this is a prophecy that will happen in the future, and there is this Aswan High Dam that's there, and if it broke, it would be devastating. The Prime Minister, I want to get to things that happened in Israel this week. Things unfolded rather quickly. And they happened where? They happened in the north of Israel. I have another thing that I'll get to in just a moment. But this has been talked about for a long time. There's a new security person that's kind of risen through the ranks that Netanyahu trusts quite a bit. And one of the things he said is, if we get into a battle, we will send Lebanon back to the Stone Age. Now, last summer I put up this article by Seth Frantzman about the next war will be bloody, a trip along Israel's tense northern border. And Seth and this other person had gone up and looked at things along the northern border of Israel. And and today I don't have my laser in my PowerPoint. So the northern border of Israel, let's see, I'll have to point here. Here's Damascus, and then you go down here, you have Majel Shams, it's down here, Mount Hermon, and you go all the way over here to Beirut. So Beirut to Damascus is roughly 50 miles. So everything's pretty close up there. It's about 32 miles from the center of Damascus to Majel Shams. And we drove along the border when we were there last spring. And one of the things that happened in June when we got back was, and you turn down the sound on this because he's speaking in Hebrew and it's an interpretation. This is the head of the Israeli Air Force. And he went to the Herzliya security conference last summer in June. You can find the video on YouTube. And he said, we're preparing for war on the northern border. And we're doing things, we're increasing the quantity and the quality. And the quantity will be stunning, and the quantitative thing is 4 to 6 times what we had in the last Lebanon war back in 2005 or 2006. And we will accomplish our goals in 48 to 60 hours. Now, it will be devastating. Here is a person from Hebrew University who was on the Debka File program last Monday. You can get that at ILTV YouTube channel. They put out about a 25-minute program every Monday. And he was talking about the situation on the northern Israel. Now, he has a heavy accent, so you'll have to listen closely.
With us in the studio to discuss this is Dr. Danny Orbach, senior lecturer at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
What was the purpose of Assad reassuring Israel that Syria does not want war?
If such an assurance was indeed given, then the idea is to prevent misunderstandings. It's quite clear that both sides do not want war. But such wars often break out because no side actually knows what the other wants. An enemy tends to assume that the other side plans to attack first. So there may be a situation of mutual escalation, which each side will try to attack first before the other side will attack. Therefore, if the news is true, what Assad and Aoun try to make sure Lebanon and Syria don't want war, so we can start to de-escalate the situation, to prevent such a misunderstanding.
Was Lebanese President Aoun influenced by Assad's decision, or do you think his decision was made on his own initiative?
I don't believe it was made on his own initiative. Of course, I can only assume, but...
Let me give you the gist of what he said. Listen, wars start sometimes through a misunderstanding. And they're little trigger events that don't seem that big a deal in hindsight, but because of everybody making assumptions about what the other guy is thinking, what the other guy wants to do, things can spin out of control very quickly. And now the situation is that there's sort of this tacit agreement that Israel will not attack Lebanon. So when the drone came in from Syria, Israel shot the drone down. I'll show you that in a moment. But Hezbollah has been hardening their fortifications. I think to the extent that they're able in that rocky soil to build some tunnels. They've been doing that. They can launch, it appears, at least 1,500 pretty precise missiles that can reach all of Israel a day. That might be enough. I mean, so Israel knocks down 90% of them. That means 150 get through. That's a situation that this professor or lecturer says Israel will find intolerable. But Hezbollah is pushing the envelope, trying to get Israel to do something. And so what's happening, he says, is the rules of the game are changing. And so that was last Monday that he gave that interview. And then On Wednesday, this report came out from the International Crisis Group, Israel, Hezbollah, and Iran preventing another war in Syria. And it's a very fast, here's a little video clip that came along with this 40-page report.
The last time Israel and Hezbollah fought a war was in 2006. That's many years ago, 12 years ago. That is longer than any other space of time between wars that Israel has fought in Lebanon. The situation has been stable, relatively stable, because of a sense that both had of the rules of the game. Now, these rules have changed because of the war in Syria, because now Hezbollah has gone into that war as of 2012, 2013, and has expanded its influence there, and so has Iran. And so for Israel, it now sees that the front line with Hezbollah has extended from Lebanon into Syria, and it is a very unstable situation. Any miscalculation, any misinterpretation, any miscommunication could trigger a conflagration that neither side claims to want and we think doesn't want. We can take steps to prevent an escalation that would lead to a confrontation by having an outside mediator who can help reassert the rules of the game. And we think that in the current setup in Syria, where Russia is in the driver's seat, it can play a role, given that it has good relations with both Israel and Iran/Hezbollah, better than the United States, of course, and therefore can play a mediating role to ensure that the two sides don't get into an accidental direct military confrontation. So it's not clear to us that Russia would be willing to do it, but it's clearly now the one that is the strongest power, outside power. And therefore it does have a responsibility also to mediate, and it also has an interest, because frankly, if it is Russia's intention to settle and stabilize Syria as a way of extricating its own forces, then it certainly wouldn't want another fight to break out in the south, for example. So it is every interest to try to come to some kind of new arrangement in the south between Israel and Iran/Hezbollah.
Well, that's very interesting because it plays right into the scenario. Because I mean, Russia came down; they wanted the base, they wanted the military or the naval base at Tartus, they wanted the air base at Latakia, so they came down to help out Assad. And for a while, things went their way. But now things are sort of deteriorating. They want to get out. They can't get out because they're in. That's what foreign policy was saying, is this is Putin's mission accomplished moment. It's not quite over. And the thing that you kind of see, if Russia is this power that comes down in Ezekiel 38 and 39, they're what's it say? I will put hooks, not a hook, hooks in your jaw. There'll be reasons why you're drawn in. And so now we see this sort of unwinding in a way that it's hard for Russia to extricate itself from being there in the north of Israel. And so what are they going to do? What's the best thing for them to do? Plus, they have what I've mentioned many times before. They have that demographic problem, a rising Muslim population. Statistics I've seen say 25% of Moscow is Islamic. Well, how do you quell the Islamic people? By the way, I did some back research. I talked about this a few years ago. The Economist, which is hardly I mean, look, it's a global New World Order magazine, but they were saying Europe will be majority Muslim in 2 generations. And I will say that these demographic shifts, well, that demographic ship has sailed. Now, these demographic shifts happen very, very quickly. And they happen much more quickly than the experts even realize. And so Moscow has problems. And so I think part of this, if they're in fact this power that comes in, they're drawn down in for a reason, even though they appear to be reluctant. So all this week, so here's some of the findings, principal findings from this report. You ought to go look it up online. International Crisis Group, Israel, Hezbollah, and Iran preventing another war in Syria. It's available online. Go to the International Crisis Group website. You can download the PDF or you can read the whole thing online. What's new? A new phase in Syria's war augurs escalation with Israel. And did you see the parallels between the Hebrew University person and the person from the International Crisis Group? They're talking about the rules of the game changing, and that could lead to war, and it could escalate very, very, very quickly. So a new phase in Syria's war augurs escalation with Israel. As the Assad regime gains the upper hand, Hezbollah probes the southwest, and Iran seeks to augment its partners' military capacities. Israel has grown fearful that Syria is becoming an Iranian base. And this is exactly what the leadership in Israel has been saying this week. It's interesting that this thing came out, and I don't know if the guy from the Hebrew University is part of this group or not. There was very clear parallel between what he was saying and what they said in that short clip. Rules of the game that contained Israeli-Hezbollah clashes for over a decade have eroded. New rules can be established in Syria by mutual agreement or by a deadly cycle of attack and response in which everyone will lose. A broader war could be one miscalculation away. Somebody sent me an email like, "You're just a fearmonger." And I'm like, I'm only telling you what all the experts are saying and what the Bible says. What should be done? Russia should broker understandings that bolster the de-escalation agreement, distancing Iran-backed forces from Syria's armistice line with Israel. Halt Iran's construction of precision missile factories and its military infrastructure in Syria, and convince Israel to acquiesce in foreign forces remaining in the rest of Syria pending a deal on the country's future. And this is a very difficult situation. And so then we had the drone, Israel shot it down. We know that in the Dara area, south of Damascus down here, you see the little pink way down at the bottom of Syria. That's ISIS controlled. Just to the left, that white area there, that's the Golan Heights that Israel has controlled since 1967. And they're never giving it back. I think that should be off the table too. But Russia, this is supposed to be a de-escalation zone down there around Dara, which is 30 miles east of the south end of the Sea of Galilee. But Russia is talking about they're getting their forces together to move in there to fight the Syrian rebels. And we have people in that area. We attacked up here near Dar el-Zor. You see the sparsely populated area here on the right of the eastern part of Syria. We attacked Russian mercenaries up there, and there were 215 casualties from an airstrike. ISIS has not been defeated. This is a graphic from, I think, the New York Times this week. It says, the war in Syria continues to defy attempts at resolution. It is largely driven by three major intersecting conflicts playing out at the same time. Up here, where ISIS, up there near Mosul, it says, the celebrations over ISIS defeat may have been premature. Many of its fighters have simply gone underground. This is this week. This is the Institute for the Study of War saying the same thing. Russia and Assad are now pounding eastern Ghouta. Eastern Ghouta would be that area to the east of Damascus, Ghouta province, like between Palmyra and Damascus. And that's still heavily populated by Sunnis, and what Assad is doing there is what they're doing there. They've been bombing things, and they're trying to get people to leave. People in Israel, there's all kinds of different reactions, another unnecessary war. Here's Prime Minister Netanyahu, and on the left you'll see the destruction, the IDF video of the destruction of the Iranian drone.
I've been warning for some time about the dangers of Iran's military entrenchment in Syria. Iran seeks to use Syrian territory to attack Israel for its professed goal of destroying Israel. This morning, Iran brazenly violated Israel's sovereignty. They dispatched Iranian territory into Israel, and this demonstrates 100% correct.
Sorry, I didn't know.
Israel holds Iran and its Syrian host responsible for today's aggression, We will continue to do whatever is necessary to protect our sovereignty and our security.
And then here they went and they took out where the thing was launched from. And now, I mean, now you get to see the wars unfold. So one of the guys from the IDF tweeted, it was sort of a tweet. I saw this, so this is a convoy being destroyed, an Iranian convoy. I don't know if this was this week or if this is an older video. I could not find the exact source file, but it's interesting if you listen to it. They go after these guys, and you see the guys exiting the vehicle and running away, and they're taken care of. This is down in the Golan Heights in the bottom. That's the Israeli jet that was shot down, and it was released today by the IDF that, yes, this was in fact shot down by shrapnel from a surface-to-air missile. There's a chain of events here. You can stop it and look at that if you want as to how everything happened. So the drone comes in. Israel says that's enough. They destroyed where the drone came from. They bombed 12 other sites in Syria, some near Damascus. Tom Friedman, he's all upset. Before all of this happened, his column early last week was, everyone is going all the way these days. There are Thelma and Louise moments all over. And here's Tom Friedman from the New York Times. Here's the summary of what he said. It's Donald Trump's fault. And so there's all these consequences. There's this article, A Familiar Road to War. This was somebody who served under Colin Powell and talked about, well, we did this when we went into Iraq. It wasn't the right thing. Now we're trying to do it again. And Trump is following the Bush administration Iraq playbook. And there's the hint in there is that we're being drawn into this thing in Israel because of Jewish billionaires. This is what, and people get away with it. By the way, Brian Schrager will be here next Sunday. We'll be doing a prophecy update together as the plan. He recently went to Jonathan Spire did a launch of his book, Days of the Fall, Reporter's Journey in the Syrian and Iraq Wars. It's very well done. And we'll talk about that because I have the video, and we'll probably play a little bit of that video. I've been holding it back, of his lecture that he gave in Jerusalem and some of the things that he said. And Jonathan Spire, he writes for Foreign Policy, writes for a lot of Jerusalem Post, a lot of other publications, and he's very thoughtful, he's very well. But he says, he looked back at the Sochi conference that Russia had just a few weeks ago. They had 150 or 1,500 people show up. Of course, none of the major players in the Syrian civil war showed up. And he's saying there's just no Russian option for Israel in Syria. And the Sochi conference was a failure, and that's why Foreign Policy and other publications are coming out and saying it's not going as well as you think for Putin. He's being drawn in. He concludes with this. This means, in his article in the Jerusalem Post the other day, this means that the Israeli hope of Russian pressure to keep the Iran border must be in vain, which in turn leaves a number of possibilities. One, that Israel acquiesced to the activities of Iran and its associated militias in the area immediately east of Kenitra Crossing, which is highly unlikely. A lot of you have been to Kenitra. They're in the Golan Heights. They're in the no man's land area. You see the UN trucks going back and forth. And so Israel can accept Iranian influence and people and factories and all that there, and that's not going to happen. Two, another option or possibility that Israeli threat declarations and covert action continue to deter the Iranians both from concerted attempts to establish themselves in this area, which is possible. And three, that such declarations and covert activities do not have the desired effect, at which point Israeli decision makers would have to choose between acquiescing or a concerted military strike. And he says this, it is not possible to predict which of these possibilities will play out. But the proceedings in Sochi paid to the notion that the Russian presence is sufficiently strong to offset the possibility of direct Israeli-Iranian confrontation in Syria through the imposition of a Russian guiding hand on Iranian actions. No such guiding hand exists, so the matter will be decided over the ruined soil of Syria by Israel and Iran. Interesting. So after the downing of the F-16, Iran said, you guys aren't going to do this anymore. And Netanyahu came out and said, we did serious damage. They've looked at the drone, and it seems to be an American stealth knockoff drone. This was this plane that was shot down. It's been a long time. Israel has not lost a plane in combat since 1982. Israel, and after the jet was down, Israel embarked on its most extensive bombing campaign inside the country since last year when it moved to destroy Syria's anti-aircraft capacity. Look at this quote out of this article from the Times of Israel this morning. In the first direct public acknowledgement of a strike inside Syria during the country's civil war, first public acknowledgement, Israel said it had bombed 12 military sites across the region. So, everything seems to be going on, and then the Times of Israel article, it goes to on what the crisis group says. So the situation on the north of Israel, in the Golan and to the north, this is this blue area is the Golan Heights, and there's a Syrian live map. It's amazing what you could find on the internet these days about all these things going on. So there's all these conflicts going on there. Even in the north, into the yellow areas, which are controlled by the Kurds. Turkey is moving in, trying to take over Afrin, and the whole situation seems to be very, very fluid. So it's just a little graphic I pulled off Google Earth. Down here in the lower left, Majel Shams, which is the far, far north part of Israel. And then up here, well, maybe I do. That's Majel Shams, and that's Damascus. And one of the main strikes that they made there was on the weapons factories that were just really in a suburb of Damascus. From Majel Shams there to the center from the center of that circle to the center of that circle is 32 miles. So that'll give you how close that factory was to it's like a warehouse in the suburbs of Columbus. And then, of course, Iranians are blustering back, well, you're not going to do this again. So, look, the situation is very fluid, very fragile. It could change while I was up here talking. So it's just interesting that in the area where the Bible prophesies trouble will come from is where there is trouble now. And I think you need to pay attention to it. So let's pray. Father, thanks so much for your word. Father, we pray for these the families of these brave police officers here locally who were killed yesterday, that you will cause people to rally around them, support them, give them comfort and peace to the extent that is possible, but that justice will be done in this case and done quickly. We pray for Israel and the countries over there, and people are dying, and it looks like we're on the verge of war. We pray that you will give people wisdom as they operate in this very volatile time in history. Watch us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.